You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. While we got E-Tech weapons in Borderlands 2, they were actually preceded by Eridian weapons in the very first Borderlands game. Eridian weapons were made by the mysterious Eridians that we have encountered in some of the more recent Borderlands games like the pre-sequel or Tales from the Borderlands. What is cool about Eridian weapons is that all Eridian weapons have infinite ammo, but they consume a charge when fired. The charge meter will recharge over time as long as you aren't firing the weapon itself. Now, for the most part, Eridian weapons are sort of hit or miss in terms of their quality and how good or bad they are. In some cases, you may actually be better off with a regular assault rifle or an SMG as opposed to an Eridian blaster. The funny thing is that the same thing can be said of most E-Tech guns in Borderlands 2 as well. Even still, some of these are pretty decent, and these are what I think are the top 7 best Eridian guns and weapons Borderlands 1 has to offer. Number 7. The Eridian Fire Rifle. The Eridian Fire Rifle is a type of Eridian weapon that got added with the General Knox DLC. There are actually 3 Eridian rifles, which are the Flare Gun, Fireball, and Fire Bomb, and the Fire Bomb is going to be the one that you're seeing gameplay for in this particular video. What the fire rifle does is it fires an invisible projectile which creates a fire explosion when it comes in contact with an enemy, wall, or other surface. And what you'll notice is that the initial explosion doesn't seem to deal much damage. However, the fire damage over time effects are pretty powerful and are sort of similar to the Firehawk pistol or like your Hellfire SMG. I've also found that I like Eridian fire rifles with Lilith's Phoenix skill as well. The problem with the Eridian fire rifle is that hitting targets is kind of a pain. Something that should take usually like 1 to 2 shots can end up taking up to 3 or 4 because it's difficult to tell where your bullets are going since they're invisible. Even still, it's a pretty neat gun if you need something with good fire damage or if you want a weapon that has good fire damage over time effects. Number 6. The Eridian Shock Rifle. So this is another Eridian weapon that got added with Borderlands 1's The Secret Armory of General Knox DLC. Unlike the other 2 elemental rifles that got added with the Knox DLC, the Eridian rifle doesn't have either a blue or yellow legendary rarity version. This is a shame because it seems like the Eridian rifle could be a lot better than it currently is. It's possible to get this gun mixed up with the Eridian Lightning from Borderlands 1 Vanilla. The biggest difference that you'll notice is that the Eridian Shock Rifle has a flower barrel with red text that reads, quote, "full of electric death." And this is in contrast to the Eridian Lightning, which has this sort of elongated barrel, and the red text is something to the effect of, am I going to break this thing or not? Something else you will notice is that the Eridian Rifle doesn't consume as many charges per shot as the Eridian Lightning does. I think with the Eridian Lightning, you get about 5 shots with the entire charged magazine, where with the Eridian Rifle, you're getting about 10 or more, which that's pretty good. Now, the shock damage on the Eridian Rifle is pretty decent as well, especially if you can trigger a damage over time effect. And this gun may feel limited after a little while though. You may ultimately find that you prefer one of the other Eridian weapons on this list instead. Number 5, the Eridian Cannon. The Eridian Cannon is really the Eridian version of a rocket launcher, and I would say for what it is, it's actually pretty decent. That said, I recommend you avoid the Eridian Mega Cannon because it consumes way more charge per shot, and the damage isn't substantially higher to justify even using it. With the versions that I have played with, the Mega Cannon fires 3 shots before being depleted, while the standard Eridian Cannon fires 5 and has twice the fire rate. And if you're curious, the Mega Cannon you get with General Knox, where the standard Eridian Cannon is with the vanilla game. The big problem with both the Cannon and the Mega Cannon is the slow projectile speed. I would recommend that you only use this either up close or at medium distances from enemies. You'll also find that since this is only a green rarity weapon, that your damage isn't going to be quite as good as some of your regular rocket launchers. That said, ammo is free and will replenish itself if you ever run out. The only thing is that I wish this came in other elements. I think that actually might make it a better weapon, because if you had a fire Eridian cannon, that would go really well up against bandits. A corrosive version would go up really well against the Crimson Lance. Number 4, the Eridian Mercurial Blaster. So as I may have mentioned earlier, Eridian blasters are based off of SMGs and machine guns that can be acquired from other manufacturers. Some of these have cool effects like homing projectiles, but I think the most viable blasters are the Mercurial Blaster and the Wave Blaster, and as far as the Wave Blaster goes, I will be going over that later on in this particular video. When compared to a standard Eridian blaster, the Mercurial version has a much better fire rate, and that will ultimately contribute to much better DPS. You'll find that the Mercurial blaster is really good up against standard psychos and other bandits, but it's going to have some difficulty up against the Crimson Lance. Just like the Eridian cannon, the Mercurial blaster can't come in any element, and this definitely makes it limited up against certain enemy types. Even still, it should be good up against lighter armor or enemies with lower health. Number 3, the Eridian Corrosive Rifle. Now, the Eridian Corrosive Rifle is a type of Eridian weapon that was added with the General Knox DLC. There are 4 corrosive rifles, and they are called the Glob, Splat, Rolling Spatter, and the Stampeding Spatter. And of the 4 that I just mentioned, you're watching gameplay of the Stampeding Spatter, which has corrosive projectiles that can ricochet. The biggest advantage that the Eridian corrosive rifles have is that you can see the projectile that you are firing. Now, the downside is that the arcing projectiles can make it difficult to hit moving targets, and just like the fire rifle, you may occasionally have some problems with trying to get the corrosive balls to hit your targets. Something that should take about 1 to 2 shots can sometimes take up to 3 or 4, just because of the unintuitive nature of how the projectiles travel. But like the fire rifle, the elemental damage over time effects on the Eridian corrosive rifles are awesome. Since it's a corrosive weapon, you can inflict corrosive damage over time effects, which makes it so enemies take more damage from your other weapons or other damage types. It might actually be good to carry one of these to quickly apply the corrosive status effect on an enemy and then switch to another weapon afterwards. For that reason, I would say that you really can't go wrong with these. The only thing is that, again, those projectiles are a bit of a problem, but you can sort of figure that out. Number 2, the Wave Blaster. In my personal opinion, I think the Wave Blaster is the best of the Eridian blasters that are available. While the projectile pattern is a pain and is difficult to control, the shock element and the potential shock damage over time effects make this much better than the other blasters. What's also nice is that this weapon doesn't require any DLC for Borderlands 1. You're also going to find that the damage potential on the Wave Blaster is a little higher too, so your shots will deal a little bit more damage, especially if you manage to score a critical hit. What I will say is that the wave pattern on the Eridian rifle is very similar to TK's Wave shotgun, and I mean, it's not quite as bad in a way, but at the same time, I mean, it is very difficult to properly judge your distance to where you can score a critical hit consistently. And you're going to have some problems with that. What I think you'll find is that the shock element makes this much better than the Mercurial Blaster, which you'd think actually that the Mercurial Blaster would be better, but ultimately I think the Wave Blaster is better because you get a shock element and you have the potential for damage over time effects. Overall, I really like the Wave Blaster, and I think it's one of the better Eridian weapons that you can get in Borderlands 1. You can get a lot of shots off and deal a decent amount of damage with this gun. Number 1, the Eridian Thunderstorm. This is my personal favorite of all of the Eridian weapons. The Thunderstorm is essentially the Eridian version of the standard shotgun. You'll ultimately find it's better to be really close to an enemy before you decide to pull the trigger with this gun. Otherwise, you'll risk having a bunch of these shock projectiles miss. What's great about the Thunderstorm is that it doesn't require any DLC, it has a ×8 multiplier, and the Thunderstorm comes in shock element with a decent amount of shock damage over time as well. 2 to 3 shots from this thing should kill most mob enemies. The only sad thing is that the Thunderstorm consumes a fair amount of charge per shot. and really I found you're only going to get about 5 shots or so. Ultimately, I think you're going to find that this is a really nice weapon. It's definitely not the best weapon in the game or the most practical, but the damage potential here is fairly impressive. I just wish that you could get more shots off before that weapon had to recharge though. Alright guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and let me know what you think of Eridian weapons. Do you think they're terrible? Do you think they're great? Honestly, I think they're hit or miss. They're not quite as good as some of the regular guns in the game, but it is what it is. But again guys, like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and take care, and I'll see y'all next time.